who do you have around you?
Yep.
And whose words are you listening to?
Yep.
Whether it's audio or visual.
Or visual.
Or you're reading.
Or you're reading. Yeah, and that leads to character. The person you date or the persons you date in your 20s can swing you either way.
Just this morning, as I was coming for this convo, interestingly, I was listening to this guy on Instagram. I have a bad habit of consuming Instagram feeds when I'm eating or whatever. But thankfully today it was positive. And this guy said, the life you have today is a result of who you are today or have been. So if you don't like the sort of life you have today, you have to change. You want to change it into something else. But that change means you have to change you. That other life that you want requires a different you. So how do I become a different me? And that's a painful thing to realize, especially as you get older, because you have less time. You have less time to make mistakes. You have less time to go through this process of filling yourself with words, whether it's reading books or listening to a mentor or whatever. You need to be deliberate about what words you're allowing in. And that was such a sober reminder of what you just described. And then I'm reminded of something else. Another mentor of mine said that really made a huge impact on me, which is why I like to read. He said, if you ascribe to Christianity, which you and I do, I got born again when I was 13 at Nairobi Pentecostal Church, Valley Road.
Man, you're a saint, eh?
I wish. I'm a work in progress. But he said, God, the Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, the creator of all men and the entire universe and everything inside it, which today is still expanding at the speed of light in every direction, perpetually. Just to have that context. He came and left. The only thing he left us was his word. It was written down. So why would this supernatural being who has the ability to create everything we know and see and don't know and don't see, including the ability to create amazing technology, which human beings have been doing, why would he leave us words on a book, in a book? Like, why?
So back to what you were saying, words affecting our imagination.
It's the seed that affects everything else.
To your character.
Yes, and your character leads you to your destination. Your destiny is a result of your character.
No wonder it says word and word becomes flesh.
Yes, because it was the seed.
It was the seed,
seed that started that whole process. I think what I'm hearing you say that for your 20s, who do you have around you? And whose words are you listening to? Whether it's audio or visual.
Or visual.
Or you're reading.
Or you're reading.
That's...
and that leads to character. How your character will evolve. And talking about habits, I think is an important word you've brought up here. A lot of the stuff that we struggle with in our 30s, 40s, even going to 50s, are habits that we actually developed, especially in our early 20s. That's where it was cemented. Most drug addicts, it started somewhere between high school and uni. And uni. I remember one of the things that one of the decisions that I made when I was young, and you've spoken several times here about dating, that I would not date more than one girl at a time. And it was such a conscious decision because I never wanted to imagine myself as a married man and going outside my marriage. But these things that people are struggling with later on in life are really habits you think you will escape with when you're in your early 20s. How you spend your money without any, if you spend money in a chaotic fashion, it's very difficult to change that when you're married.
Okay. When you're older.
When you're older. So I think these early 20s is really the point where you start setting yourself up for success. And it is really driven by the kind of exposure you have. Who are you hanging around with? What are you reading?
Yeah.
What are you really exposing your soul to? And of course, the supreme, how your connection is vertically.
That's, honestly, that's a scary thought. It's a scary thing to realize, because then you're like, I wish someone told me this when I was turning 20. As opposed to stumbling through life and finding out from experience.
Yes.
I wish someone bothered to, even if maybe I wouldn't have listened, because that's the thing about human psychology. We're told, but you don't really quite get it. But at least I wish I had the opportunity to have someone tell me that earlier, because then I would have avoided a lot of wastage of time.
Yep, exactly.
And you're right. Studies have shown that a boy's mind, a male human being, their mindset, their personality, their character, by the time they're 25, 27, is set.
Complete.
The 25-year-old...
You need to uninstall the software to change the mind.
Which is very difficult.
Which is impossible.
It requires supernatural intervention a lot of times, or extreme trauma.
Yes.
Which no one wants.
Yes.
Because that guy, when you meet him and he's 55, 60, 70, same guy he was at 25, 27. So what you do before then, your early 20s, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You need to be deliberate. And for the life of me, I don't know why these conversations are not being had with young men and girls, young women in their 20s, about how to set themselves up on that proper trajectory. So, in conclusion on this convo, what would you say? What would be your advice to
the young guys?
To the young guys.
To the young guys. Maybe Solo, even before we get there.
If they came to ask you.
There's something I want to hear from you before we conclude. And I think it's important. One of the things that we cannot deny is that in your early 20s is when you start also discovering yourself in relation to the opposite sex. And you've mentioned that you are in relationship. Just how impactful was that relationship? Because it can go either way. The person you date or the persons you date in your 20s can swing you either way.
True.
Yeah.
Because of their proximity to you.
Yeah.
For me, it was interesting. I mentioned my first journey out of Kenya was to go visit my girlfriend. My first serious girlfriend. I was sure I was going to marry this girl. It didn't work out because I went to the States. She was in SA. And while I was in the States, I met another girl, a beautiful Tanzanian girl, who happened to have been based in Kenya. Her family lived and worked in Kenya. So, we had a lot in common. And I found myself falling for this chick. And for a brief period of time, I was still trying to keep that other relationship alive while falling for this other chick. And it all came to a head a year later. I came home for Christmas, 1999. Was the only time I ever visited home from the States. I got stuck there for another 10 years after without setting foot back home. But I came home. My Tanzanian girlfriend from campus was also home. My previous girlfriend was also home from SA, and we all met at my house. Let me tell you, I sweated bullets. I have never experienced anything like that in my life, because I had not been honest with both of them about my heart situation. But it became apparent at that point. So later on, we broke things off with my first.
You were forced to make a decision.
Well, yes, I was, because my Tanzanian Chile and I were going back to school in the States.
Yes.
The first one was going back to SA.
Yeah.
And I'm trying not to mention their names because I didn't get their permission to talk about them on camera. But maybe I will later. But it was obvious to me that I was being unfair to the South African-based girlfriend, because it was not practical for us.
Yeah.
Even if I hadn't, it would have been extremely difficult.
Yes.
Because I had no idea when I was going to see her again. She had no idea when we were going to see each other again. In the meantime, I'm constantly interacting with this other one.
Yes.
And falling even deeper. And that was my introduction to relationships. Thankfully, things worked out with the second girlfriend, but we dated for 11 years before things changed.
Serious due diligence.
It was not intentional. She was ready after 3-4 years.
Yes.
If I had proposed, she would have said yes. In fact, she had this whole plan in her head. On the day she graduated, her mom flew in for graduation. She knew I was going to get on one knee in front of her mom, and she was going to say yes, and the mom was bringing the report, like she had played it out, the wedding, kids, everything. She was 23. I was 25.
Wow.
Having dropped out of college, trying to find my place in life, I was nowhere near thinking about marriage.
Yeah.
And so we dated for so long simply because I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
I was not prepared. I was in no condition to be anyone's husband. But we ended up dating for as long as we did. Today, my first girlfriend and I, we talk every now and then on WhatsApp, social media. She's settled, she has a family of her own, and she moved on with her life as well. But you're absolutely right. Today I'm married to the second girlfriend, we have 3 children.
Wow. So, in other words, this is the point I wanted to come out.
Yeah.
They seem like they were good influences in your life.
Thankfully they were.
Yeah, because if it went the other way around, then it would have had some serious repercussions on your life.
Absolutely, but I can tell you without any contradiction or dissonance in my heart that was never going to be a problem for me, who I was going to pick to date ever. Why? Because my parents raised my sisters and I a certain way. We came from a family background that taught us certain things about how to interact with other human beings, and that gets into other issues about parenting. So that was never going to be a problem for me personally. But your conduct around dating, values, when you start having conversations about values, what is dating, sexual intimacy, even though we were Christians, at that age your hormones are raging like wild buffaloes. How do you interact? And that came all to a head later, when we're discussing issues of our faith. You have to make certain decisions, and that's a continuous journey. I can tell you personally, I'm not perfect yet. It's a continuous
work in progress. We are all work in progress.
Even in the context of marriage, it's like, hey, we dated for 11 years, but it's like still, I don't know this person. She feels the same way. She's like, who are you? Like, where did that come from? So there's a constant, continuous process of growth and adjustment.
Yeah.
And the
You're
need-
malleable. You're a malleable person.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in that context, for the young guys, I tell them, don't be in a rush.
Yeah.
Don't be in a rush. I'm not saying don't date.
Yeah.
But be deliberate about how you date.
Yeah. And I think this thing of, being consciously developing yourself, which is impacting on your character, also sort of has
It referees.
It controls the kind of people that you can date, because you need to agree on certain value systems.
1,000,000%.
Exactly.
For me, it was as simple as you meet this. There's a couple of chicks in campus I really liked. I was attracted to.
Yeah.
They open their mouths and they can't even construct sentences right. I'm like, there's no way I'm taking that chick to meet my mom. Like, non-starter. Or even just the way they dress.
Yes.
Or how they address their elders.
Yeah.
All these factors come into play, but they're built into you in the context of the family that raised you, the friends you're around. Later on, and I don't mind being open about it, because I think if we're going to have these conversations to genuinely help the younger folks, we have to be 100.
Yeah.
At some point, I started to interact with guys who were into orgies, sexual orgies and swinging and shocking things for an African boy.
That was in the US.
Yeah.
I can
And so,
understand coming from that environment.
Had I not been clear about what I was okay with, what's right and what's not, I would not have extricated myself from those groups of people.
Yeah.
And I might be a swinger today.
Yeah. Thank God you're not.
I mean, we don't like to think about it that way.
But it's a possibility if you
Because
are
of
not
influence.
You need to. There's so much that happens in your 20 to 30 that if you're not prepared for it, you will you'll go off a tangent, and that's it.
Yes.
Yeah.
1 degree off. 10 years later,
yeah.
you're light years away from where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so, your friends matter.
Yeah. And this is a key point you're underlining here. Who you date in your 20s is very key. So you got to be very careful about who you date. It may not develop into marriage, but it will have a bearing into who you become, because that's a very close peer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for the young guy or girl, 20 years old, 20, 21, 22, I stop at 23 because, for a long time I believed my mom gave birth to me when she was 24. So my relationship with 24-year-olds is very different because of that. I think of them as mother age.
Yes.
Biologically, that's a foregone conclusion. Emotionally and so on. Obviously, girls and boys, young women, young men, mature at different stages of their life. For us, it's 25, 27. You're set. I think for the young ladies, it's earlier. 22, even 20. I mean, I've met 18-year-olds who make me feel like a child. They're so mature. I mean. Case in point, the younger of my two sisters, Mel. I have two amazing sisters, Elizabeth and Mel. Every time people meet us, they assume Mel is a firstborn, automatically. She's 4 years younger than me.
Wow.
So I've always known that the female gender of our species tend to mature faster. But I think they're going to have to deal with the same issues. What would you say to them? What are the 1, 2, 3 things you would pick as counsel, having experienced your 20s?
Yeah.
Just by virtue of being an older human being. with a particular outlook in life that they might aspire to, what would you say to them?
I think let me refer to myself. When I was entering campus, one of the things that I had set up in my mind is that I was not going to date anyone in campus. But as life happens, they say mambo kwa ground is different, you know. When life started, you get to interact with people, and I got myself into a relationship with someone who is I respect even today quite a bit. And when I look back, it wasn't a mistake, it was just that we were very aligned in terms of values. The kind of stuff that I wanted to do in campus. We were doing CPA together, we were reading together for exams. So for me, I think that was the convergence that brought us together. Then you suddenly find yourself, by the way, am I in a relationship here or what, you know? So I think for me, when I look at young people who may be listening to this, don't just enter into relationships because a girl is pretty or she comes from a nice background. I think it comes down to values. What sort of, when you look at yourself into the future, does she fit into the picture? Does she enhance that journey that you will, should life take you to a place where you need to marry her, it will not be a regret, you know. You need to kind of project a little bit further, and the only thing you have at that point in time is really your value system. The things that you believe in, do you believe in those things together? How I got born again, I came from a very staunch Catholic background. No one else in our family had ever gotten born again. In fact, it was never supposed to happen. That was going against the family culture. And all along in campus, you know, very faithful Christian, Catholic follower, she would be with me in church. And just when we finished campus, she said, okay, I've always accompanied you to your church. Can you now come to my church? And I was like, okay. I didn't have the strength to say no. So I humbly accepted. And I went to Nairobi Lighthouse Church. And the first Sunday, I was like,
yeah, baptism by fire.
Wow, what just happened to me, by the way? So next Sunday, I was quite in a dilemma. Should I go to Catholic or should I go to this place that I really found? I was fitting there more than where I was coming from. And I was like, hey, by the way, that place you took me, can you take me to the same place? And it became now every Sunday. And after that, it was just a question of time. Yeah. My heart was just going and going and going. And, eventually, that's how I got born again at CITAM. Yeah. They call it what? Heaven's Gate, Hell's Flame.
Yes.
I was like, by the way, there is no way I'm missing heaven. Yeah. So when
that place scared a lot of guys into salvation. I was scared witless when I went for that play. But yes.
Yeah. But for me, that was the purpose of that individual in my life. Yeah. They led me to a place where I found a home. Yeah. And began my personal relationship with Christ. Okay. And which has become the core, the center of my life going forward, yes.
So pay attention to relationships. Don't be in a hurry to date.
Exactly. Yeah, because they can have some significance, significant influence on where you're at.
Well, they will.
They will. I think the only thing we've missed talking about this, and I know Richie is on our case here, is this is where you get our first jobs.
Money, income generation,
wealth generation. Yeah, just tell us a little bit about your first job.
My first job, wow. Yes.